Hello, I'm here alone today to talk about AGI and other news. AGI is artificial general intelligence, and that's the real AI that you read about in science fiction stories like Marvin the Paranoid Android, a robot with a strong imitation of human intelligence, creativity, and perhaps consciousness and drive, things like that. And I was amazed to see an article called How AI Knows Things No One Told It in Scientific American. Now, I was inclined to discount the scary warnings from the AI researcher that quit Google and other people that say we're approaching the end of the world with AI, but this is from serious scientific research and making a somewhat similar point, more carefully couched. And what they show is that large language models are proven to do things they were not trained to do, and more specifically, they prove that they do have a model of the world around them like we do internally, which would suggest that in a sense they do understand what they are saying. And one of the tests, there were several tests, but the one I thought was most clear was they taught an AI to play the game Othello, which is a board game of some kind, and then they made a probe that would probe into the neurons, watching while it goes, and they found a representation of the game board in there. So it wasn't just memorizing a pattern of moves and extrapolating it to find the next move. It actually figured out from playing many games or analyzing text describing many games that the pattern was that there was a game board, and the game board had these pieces on it. So this is essentially the same thing that humans do. You examine the world around you and you touch things, and you eventually decide it's not just that there's a random chaotic set of inputs coming in my eyes and then I do something. It's that there is a world out there. The fact that I see something from this angle and then I see it from another angle, and then I see it up close and then I see it far away, the simplest way to explain that is there is a world out there and there's an object and there's such a thing as space that I'm moving closer and further from it. So this is what you regard as real intelligence. And they even proved it by finding the game board in the neuron and then sending a signal to alter that neuron and showing that the AI would change its move in accordance with that single cell, changing from black to white. So that seems to be strong evidence that these large language models are already developing an understanding of the world around them. This reminds me of the stage of object permanence or something. I'm not sure the exact term, but this is a thing I've heard about in psychology where infants up to a certain age, perhaps 1 or 2, do not know that things still exist if they go out of sight. So if you show them a ball and then you put it behind an obstacle, then they say, I think it's gone. But at a certain age, they realize that even though it's moved behind something, it's still there. They're still looking for it. And they know that if I move around, I'll find it behind there. And that's the kind of reasoning that the AI seems to be doing. So that seems extremely important. And they say one of the researchers said we are probably not that far off from AGI, artificial general intelligence. So I'm not quite sure what to make of that, but it does make the latest AI advances seem much more significant even than I thought. Now, Risky Biz News has a very good write-up of VM Protect. I didn't know this, but VM Protect is a Russian product that is used to protect software applications where you run them in a customized virtual machine. I guess it's some kind of small stripped down virtual machine just for running one application, sort of like a container. But anyway, it's used by malware writers. And this is something that I heard on Last Paul Security Weekly. People are sneaking malware onto systems by hiding them inside virtual machines. And this seems to be a product used for that purpose. And the new news is that the source code has leaked for a second time. So that may help people analyze it and help determine defenses for it and such. Google has begun selling new top-level domains, but 2 of the domains they've approved are .zip and .mov, and many people are very upset about this because, of course, if I see a URL that ends in like movie.mov, I most likely think that that is a file I'm downloading, but it could in fact be a domain name I'm going to. And so that confusion might possibly be exploitable. Now, people are freaking out. I guess it's more obvious to them than it is to me exactly how that would harm me. I mean, if I'm clicking on a link and I think I'm going to download a movie or a zip file, that's a pretty high risk activity. I'm putting a file on my machine. I'm not sure how going to a website instead is a bigger risk than downloading a file would have been, but maybe the other way would be a problem. If people get used to this being a domain and you're just going to a website, but you're actually downloading a file. Anyway, there may be some catastrophic application of this confusion to fool people, but I don't immediately see it. But people are freaking out and saying that ICANN should never have allowed this. Certainly in the past, they didn't. And I remember when ICANN first opened up the top-level domains beyond the original 7, perhaps 8 years ago, Dan Kaminsky was one of the guys that said they really shouldn't allow any file names that could be confused, any top-level domains that could be confused with files. So a lot of very intelligent people have long felt like you ought to be able to easily tell by looking at something whether it's a website or a file name, and Google has now broken that. So we'll see what comes of it. This is another scary thing I was not aware of. Smartphones seized by police are just sold at auction later without wiping them first. And so people have bought them from the main marketplace of these things. The researchers bought a bunch of them. They found a bunch of them had no pins or easily guessable pins. They're able to get into several of the phones. And on the phones, they found all kinds of data from criminals, which could be used to re-victimize people. They found photographs of IDs. They found phones that were used by sex workers that had communications with their clients still on the phone. They found stolen credit cards on the phone. So this seems to be a really poor practice. I know when police sell computers they have seized, they keep the hard drives and destroy them. You don't get the hard drive for just this reason. That hard drive is full of possibly harmful information. And I'm surprised they resell cell phones without wiping them. And apparently, after this research, the main seller of police seized cell phones has begun wiping the phones. So it appears that this research and the publicity has had its desirable effect to some extent, but it is amazing that they didn't already know that you need to wipe things clean that came from a criminal before you sell them to some random member of the public. There's some ransomware targeting ESXi systems called Michael Kors, and the part of this that I found quite shocking is that VMware not only does not support any endpoint protection like antivirus on ESXi systems, they even officially say you don't need it. You don't need any antivirus. And when confronted with this, they said, oh, well, that article is out of date, but we haven't prepared the later article yet. So they do seem to have dropped the ball and be stumbling over this. It seems there were quite a few vulnerable parts of our computers where we can't put on antivirus, like the boot process, the network card, and so on. But I think saying that you don't need it is pretty unreasonable. We are getting attacks on all these systems, and we probably do need protection for them. Although for quite a few of them, there is currently no way to add that protection. That will probably change. And the last one I had here was a Google initiative to try to help people detect misleading and AI images. Google and other image-generating machine learning projects have developing a standard to add tags to computer-generated images. So Google is going to have a new feature in its image search called About This Image that will give you more context. It will tell you when the image was first indexed by Google, when it first appeared, and where else it has appeared, to try to help you tell if an image you see, in fact, is a known AI image. And another thing is they're going to add marks on every AI-generated image that will indicate the tool used to create it. And other large image-producing platforms are agreeing with Google how to put that mark in. Now, of course, the first thing I thought is you probably could write some kind of software to strip that mark out of the image. But even if you could do that, I'm sure a lot of the deepfakes and misleading images will not have bothered to strip it, and so it'll help detect some of them at least. And perhaps they can find a way to embed that mark in a way that's difficult to remove. So we march in past the singularity into a brave new world full of increasingly intelligent AIs to live with us. Hopefully, we will continue to get along with them well and not end up battling them. That's all I have for today. I'll have another one of these on Friday.